Hello and welcome to the Modern Compliance Podcast, the podcast where we talk about hot topics in the compliance industry and we share stories of other compliance experts who are going through the exact same things as you. So let's see what today's hot topic is. Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm joined today by Alex Painter, self-proclaimed asbestos nerd. Alex is an experienced asbestos manager, having cut his teeth in well-known companies including Adams Environmental, Environmental Essentials, and the John Lewis Partnership. He's worked on international framework agreements and complex projects for universities and local authorities, and he's also a committee member for NORAC. So welcome to the show, Alex.
Thank you very much. Cheers for having me.
Thank you very much for coming in. And I think today I was hoping to talk to you about the failure to recruit and retain staff in the asbestos industry, and also the race to the bottom, which is a conversation I have with lots and lots of people.
I bet you have.
Yes, indeed. And I just want to tell the audience and whoever's listening how we met. So I first met Alex when he was director at Adams Environmental. Alex wanted to make some big changes. He and his team decided to move over to our software, Flow Mobile Surveying, and away from their traditional word-based reporting methods. Adams Environmental ended up becoming one of our power users and ended up being successfully acquired by another company, Environmental Essentials. So I want to talk a little bit about brain drain in the asbestos industry. But before I do that, if you could change one thing about the asbestos industry, Alex, having been in it for a good long career, what would it be?
What I'm going to say is not possible. I could list lots of very sensible things that you could change, but the biggest one, I think probably one of the more fundamental issues we have, is the necessity to make profit, both for the removal side and the consultancy side. I think if I'm entirely honest with myself, I'm not sure it's a compatible way of dealing with a Class A carcinogen. Ultimately, asbestos compliance is just a cost. It's a necessity. It's got to be done. It's legally required, but ideally they want to spend as little as humanly possible on it. The only way to be cheaper is to do less. There's not a huge amount of profiteering in the asbestos industry, despite what many clients and duty holders probably think, looking at the huge invoices they receive for asbestos management. Companies offering to do it cheaper than everyone else are only doing that really in one of a few ways. The primary way of doing that is putting more pressure on that analyst or surveyor to do more in less time. They all put pressure. Just their phone calls, emails, just chucking an extra job on their diary at the end of the day, that sort of thing. And we saw them a lot, with Adams when we were, interviewing experienced consultants. And one of the questions you were always interested in is, well, why are you looking to make a move? And majority of the time that was either the sole factor or the largest contributing factor for why they were looking to make a move, is they were being too much pressure and they were worried that they were making mistakes. And ultimately it's their name on the report, right? So the company's making the more money out of them, but they're still only being paid their day rate, and then they're taking that risk by potentially missing something they don't want to. The vast majority of asbestos consultants want to do a good job and keep people safe, and ultimately that is what we do. We're going out every day trying to identify asbestos, trying to manage asbestos and stop people being exposed. And we don't want to cut corners. We don't want to, as a result of time pressure, lead to somebody being exposed and potentially contracting an asbestos-related cancer as a result. And I think we've moved away from an industry where we have quite a large number of smaller consultancies, many of which, Adams included, were effectively lifestyle businesses for the directors, to private equity-backed, profit-hungry entities. And I think that's the way the industry is going. And I think a lot of what we'll talk about today is probably symptomatic of that change. Ultimately it comes down to profit.
I mean, that would be an ideal world, wouldn't it? If the profit wasn't
I know. I mean,
I get what you're saying. It's not feasible.
No.
It's not the world we live in. But certainly anecdotally, I've heard the same stories as well. Like people who struck out on their own because they are worried that the companies are putting them under too much pressure to deliver results, and actually being able to work on their own means they can afford to spend more time on the property. do a good job, follow up correctly with the clients without having someone breathing down their neck and saying, you need to get this done. So it takes me on to my next kind of question, which is around, I want to get into recruitment in a second, but really just talking about brain drain. So this is something that kind of regularly comes up in conversations I have with our clients, but a lot of our clients think there's a brain drain in the asbestos industry. People leaving, not coming back, maybe not enough training, which we'll get into again later. But why do you think, well, first of all, do you think there's a brain drain in the industry? And if so, why do you think that is?
Oh no, there's 100% a brain drain. And there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, ultimately, the asbestos consultancy industry kind of began with a bit of a big bang, right? When the control of asbestos regulations came in, this whole industry was born, and people came into it. And those people are all retiring now. They're getting to a point where they're comfortable and they're looking to enjoy the spoils of their hard work, understandably. But behind them, there isn't really a large number of people who are there to take up that mantle. And that's for a number of reasons. As an industry, there are only so many steps up, and if you're competent, you move up those steps relatively quickly. So a lot of people reach what they perceive to be as far as they're able to go, and understandably don't want to hang on at that level in asbestos until one of those very few opportunities on the next level comes up, so they diversify into other sectors. So we lose a lot of people that way. We lose a lot of people through work-life balance, because it is weekends, it is nights. You are, particularly at a project manager level, on call to your clients when they're having their problems. And when an asbestos ceiling falls in, it doesn't matter if that's 3 a.m. That needs to be dealt with right there and then. Your working hours, you don't want to work, particularly as you get older, particularly as a family. And it's one of the reasons we don't have anywhere near enough women working in asbestos consultancy. Generally speaking, you can't be there to pick up your kid. You can't guarantee you're going to be there to pick up your kid from nursery at a certain time, because a job survey takes as long as it's going to take. A 4-stage clearance, you can't get 3/4 way through a 4-stage clearance and go, I've got to pick my kid up from nursery now, so this enclosure isn't coming down today. That shop isn't opening tomorrow because I've got to go. It's not particularly friendly environment for those who need flexible working. You have to be pretty much at the beck and call of the job, and that doesn't suit a lot of people. Salaries probably haven't kept up with the amount of skill and work and risk that's required. Yeah, and I think generally also there isn't a lack of professionalism in our industry, but there is a lack of perception of professionalism. I think, when people say asbestos surveyors, asbestos analysts, asbestos consultants, I don't think that they're not thinking about someone in the same way that they would be thinking about a chartered building surveyor, for example. And the reality is they're at that level in terms of the training they've received, the experience they have, the risk that they're taking, and the amount of confidence they have to have in their ability to be able to sign off an area as asbestos free and put their name to it. That absolutely should be at that same level, but it's not seen that way and it's not paid that way. And I think quite a lot of people work in asbestos with the hope of getting out of asbestos because they don't see it in themselves as, I'm in a professional environment where I can flourish and move up. So we have got a brain drain, and I think it's getting worse now. I think the amount of training that's going on is lower than it's ever been, and we struggle to recruit in the first place now, let alone retain people. So it's something that's probably getting worse rather than better. And I know we're NORAC and individual companies, they're doing things to try and stem that, but it's a challenge when you compound that with low day rates, the race to the bottom. It takes money, it takes investment to bring up the standards, bring up the perceived professionalism, and at NORAC we're really advocating for our industry to try and get it to that level, and at BOHSR as well. And I think the eventual aim is to try and get to a point where you have a chartered asbestos professional, and that you have that kind of individual accreditation as a professional asbestos consultant, which we don't have at the minute. I think you're very much seen as a worker, as a dog's body, as a number. You go out, you do the survey, you put your report in, the next day you do that again and again and again. I think actually that's probably something that's got worse over the years. And working for Flowpool, you probably won't thank me for saying this, but as we've moved towards tablet-based surveys, I think you've gone from being somebody who goes out to survey a couple of days a week, then goes in the office and perhaps has that experience in the office that allows them to upskill and do other things. You are now out on site 5 days a week doing surveys. And I think actually that we're not giving our consultants that rounded education that we once were, and I think they get bored.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've kind of heard from a few people that like you do need the feedback loop as well. Like especially if you get into the big businesses, you don't often see the reports. You just you just do the survey and that gets handled.
And that's a massive pet peeve of mine, because quite often as a senior, even as an experienced surveyor, you take a sample of something and you're not sure whether it's positive or not. And you do get times where you get it. I used to get it all the time where you get a sample back from the lab and go, what do you mean that'll come back negative or that come back positive? Particularly if it's come back positive, you're thinking, I wasn't expecting that to come back positive. Where else is that? And you go back to site and you check and you go, God, I'm glad I went back because actually that's there and there and there. And it's things like that. You've now learned that for next time. You've added to that experience bank, which if you never see the report, you're never building that experience bank, right? But also you're making sure that you're giving the client a report that's right. And I've seen it. I've seen it in countless reports where samples come back negative in a boiler room, and the other samples have been mastered to that sample that's negative. But actually, the surveyor should have really wanted to master it to a sample they thought was positive, because they know from their experience that there's asbestos residue on all those walls, but they've accidentally mastered everything to the one negative sample that was in that room, and that report's gone out to the client saying there's nothing in this room. Mm-hmm. That's the surveyor's name's gone on it, but is it their fault if that's come back negative and they've not been given the opportunity to quality check that report? I think it's debatable.
Interesting. So you're saying that actually one of the reasons why severe, I guess, contributing towards this brain drain idea in the industry, besides talking about recruitment, is that surveyors aren't getting that education, that well-rounded education of like what it actually means to be a surveyor and how to learn and progress.
I think they're treated more as a commodity now. I think they're treated as a tool. Go out and do a survey, and they'll be going out with 1 or 2 years experience. 2 years experience in a lot of our industry, you're considered a senior surveyor. Whilst when I started, maybe 15, 20 years, you'd be considered a senior surveyor. And you're not going out with another surveyor. When I learned to be a surveyor, I was learning from the company directors. I was going out with people that had been doing it since the 80s, and I was their assistant, their ladder holder, but you're learning from them, how to do a survey, but where to look, how the building's constructed. If the pipe runs here, there must be another pipe returning somewhere over there, things like that. And they don't get that now. They're going out with a couple of years experience. They're deemed an experienced surveyor, so they're put out with a trainee surveyor. So that trainee surveyor is learning from somebody who's only been doing it themselves a couple of years, and the senior surveyor, inverted commas, isn't learning anymore, because they're not going out with somebody who's seen countless more asbestos. And there is so much asbestos that you will only see once in a blue moon, particularly now where we've been removing asbestos since the 80s, the 90s. Things like sprayed coating, you don't see that every day anymore. Surveyors 20, 30 years ago would have seen it routinely, but it's a rare thing now. And surveyors who have worked for companies that have a certain type of contract may have only worked in certain types of buildings, and then they go to another company that has, okay, as an example, so they'll be a surveyor who's, say, let's say he's mainly worked for a company that does commercial real estate, right? So they do, warehouse units, they might do offices, buildings like we're in today. And then they go to work for a company that has quite a lot of, petrochemical plants. And suddenly that surveyor who's only ever done commercial buildings is now going around doing complicated plant installations in industrial buildings with 50 years of asbestos legacy that have all been removed to various standards. They, for no lack of trying, will not have the skill set to be able to do that. But there are very few people, and increasingly few people in the industry, who do have that skill set. And that's a real challenge we face now, where actually there are very few people left who can train our surveyors up to that standard. That is a hard one to sort out, because there is no shortcut to teaching a surveyor, it's just years and years and years of finding asbestos and going, oh, I haven't seen that before. That's new. That's interesting. And just building up that memory bank of different types, different uses, different places. Some of which make absolutely no sense, and some of which leave you waking up with cold sweats in the middle of the night because they really shouldn't be there, and you're worried you've missed it in all those other buildings that you've surveyed years ago. We're not teaching that, and we're not passing it on.
That's painting a real picture for me. So you're saying that because of a lot of the older generation are leaving with all that knowledge, they would be the ones who would take the young'uns around site and teach them. And now that knowledge is gone.
That's how I learned. That's how they, when you speak to them, that's how they learn. It was from being a ladder holder to somebody with significant experience, and significant experience now isn't very significant.
It's like that 10,000 hours or whatever you think. You've got to do 10,000 hours to learn something, probably.
I wish it was even that formal. I've been in post 2 years. The thing is, from a company point of view, they want to call you a senior surveyor. It's not a badge of honour. It's, if you are a senior surveyor, you can get a higher day rate.
Right.
So
you can command a higher day rate.
Yeah. On certain contracts, there is a rate for a senior surveyor and a rate for a surveyor. So
it's in their interest for you to be called a senior surveyor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, got you. Okay, more about that profit line of thinking. So what do you think companies can do to retain those experienced staff members better, bearing in mind you said a lot of them are already gone or going? How can they retain the ones they've got?
I think we need to have an honest look in the mirror as an industry and go, do we want to be a professional industry? Do we want to be seen the same way as chartered surveyors do? And if so, we need to hold ourselves to those standards. We need to root out the people that can't do this job and stop hiring them. We need to get out of the bums on seats mentality. We need to drive up quality, and I think organically through that process, more people will stay because they feel that they are part of something professional, part of something worthy, that they want to be, in as a career for a decent portion of their professional life. That would help bring people in at the bottom end, because I think we could shift perception of the industry to be one that's actually quite a good one to get into, and it should be, because you're keeping people safe. It's a worthy job. It's a job where you can go to bed at night and legitimately look yourself in the mirror and go, today I identified that asbestos, which is going to be taken out in a few weeks' time, and people are not going to be exposed to it and not potentially develop an asbestos-related cancer as a result of my hard work today. And you can't say that about every job. So it's a worthy job. It's a worthy career. But I don't think we paint it that way, and I don't think we're particularly good at selling ourselves as an industry either. I mean, did you know that asbestos consultancy was a job when you were doing careers at school?
I didn't. What I do remember from school was being given a list of jobs that I'd be good at, and I remember one of them was fish farmer.
Awesome.
And one of them was something like software developer or some of the crazy, astrophysicist or something. I ended up doing sort of physics and maths at university, but I could have equally been a fish farmer according to the list.
There you go.
You never know. But no, asbestos consultant never came up.
No, it doesn't for anybody. It's not on anyone's radar. So we're not good at selling ourselves. I think the word asbestos generally conjures up death and old men, sort of coughing their lungs out and things like that. I don't think they think of it as a potentially lucrative, career, which is crazy because it is. And actually, I came out of university with a reasonable degree, but not a whole lot of life experience, and that job as a trainee analyst has given me my entire career. We don't talk about that at all. And I think, to be honest, a lot of companies don't really provide that either. They're literally using you for churn. You're a commodity to use 6-7 days a week until you get sick and tired and leave. We also need to offer more training and better training, and probably more hands-on training. I know a number of our NORAC members have been working on creating an apprenticeship route, which I think has just gone live now. Actually, the Tiro, the company that they've developed that with one of the sponsors of the NORAC conference coming up, which is we're really happy to have them on board. But I'm really excited about that because I'm hoping that will offer a route in for people who who perhaps wouldn't have considered asbestos as an industry, but it's more accessible to them, and they'll get those skills. And if that course is tailored right, hopefully they'll come in with a decent grounding knowledge and can learn from those who remain in the industry. But it's going to take commitment from those companies to actually train them. That's not everyone in the industry by any account. There are a lot of companies putting good time and money into training, but I think more need to do so, and of those doing it, probably we all need to do it more.
I can see, just as an outsider kind of looking into this industry, that there would be some immediate sort of challenges to recruitment, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I guess, like you say, the word asbestos strikes a feeling or a chord in lots of different people. Presumably, especially the younger generation, might be presented with job A and job B. This one's potentially going to be risky for me, and this one's not. Is that part of the challenge with recruitment?
Oh, definitely. And it's not a glamorous job. So yes, you're absolutely right. A lot of people, just the word asbestos will put them off. I'm going to be working with something that I know kills people. Why would I do that when I could get an office job or even go work in a shop or whatever? So yeah, a lot of people will be put off by that. But actually, a further number of people are put off by the reality of the job, and that is, the long hours. But it's also the fact that you are wearing mask and coveralls and crawling around floor ducts and in asbestos enclosures, and you're spending hours and days on your hands and knees with a torch looking for individual specks of dust while there's a contractor over your shoulder being perhaps not particularly pleasant about you because you're taking so long and they really want to get to the pub by 4, and why are you still doing this? Why can't you just put your pumps on already? So it does take a certain type of person to do the job. The answer isn't to just go and recruit a load of people and train them up. It needs to be a certain type of person that can do the job and do the job well. It takes a certain type of strange to really love asbestos.
It's interesting. It kind of makes me think of nursing and nursery workers. It's probably not the best well-paid job in the world, but if you love helping people and you love working with children, in the case of the nursery worker, then that's probably the ideal job. I guess for asbestos surveyors or analysts, as you say, you're keeping people safe, right? You go to bed thinking, I did some good work today. The work that I put in has helped someone else live a long life.
Yeah, exactly. I think perhaps even a lot of people in the industry don't think that way. And I think we owe it to ourselves to be proud of what we're achieving in terms of
reframe it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So in terms of recruitment, I'd like to talk a bit more about that. Have you been directly involved with recruitment in your work? And can you tell me about your experience?
Yeah. So I mean, even before I was director, I was doing job interviews, and then we were recruiting all the time because you can't hire enough experienced people, and you struggle to retain the good ones because there are other jobs out there. So yeah, we were hiring Adams 2-3 times a year, and that was taking trainees on. So no previous experience in the industry. We would also interview experienced people, but they were few and far between, and those on the market were not of the caliber or temperament that we were looking for. So we primarily took on trainees, and we did things a little bit differently at Adams in that we ended up we often took from graduates. So we had a graduate recruitment scheme. We hired from environmental sciences, geography, geology degrees, that sort of thing, which actually gives you a really good firm basis for the fundamentals of environmental monitoring. Sort of what I was saying earlier, I was doing sort of air quality, measurements in cities. It's not a million miles away from measuring asbestos fibre concentrations in air. Also, geology, geography, environmental students are not opposed on principle to putting on waders and coveralls and getting dirty and standing out in the rain and being cold. So they're not necessarily looking for desk jobs. So we found that they were quite perceptive to, receptive to the idea of our industry. We take on 6 to 9 a year. I couldn't even tell you how many people we've trained who are probably still in the industry and sort of in various capacities, but it's probably in the hundreds.
That's impressive. Did many of them stick around, or did you train them up and they went elsewhere? What happened?
We worked on we worked on the basis that if we retained 50% of them after 2 years, we'd done very well. Generally speaking, you would lose at least one wouldn't be cut out for it, and would either wouldn't make it through the scheme or would leave of their own accord because they just decided that the industry wasn't for them, which is fine.
So this is 1 out of those 9 years.
One, yes, yeah, but it's 50% of every intake. So if we took on 2, maybe one of them would make it through, which sounds like a really low percentage, and I wish it was higher. But we were of the mindset that it was better to have those honest conversations early on, rather than get to a point where you've invested significant time and money into somebody who either their heart's not in it or they're just not, they're not equipped for what we needed them to do. Particularly with, we took them on as trainee analysts, so they would get out doing the air monitoring first, and they would do that for a couple of years, and then we put them through their surveying. And to be an asbestos analyst, you have to have a pretty hard-nosed attitude. You are put under pressure by removal contractors. They are at times unpleasant to you. They are quite often pushing you to get done quicker, faster, and it takes a certain type of person, particularly as someone in their early 20s, fresh out of university, to look at somebody twice plus your age with all that years experience in the industry and go, no, what I says is what's happening. This is the way we're going to do it. It's my way or the highway, and hold firm on that. And that's that particular type of person. Not everyone can do that, and we would never expect everyone to do that. But I don't think we would always make this clear in the interviews, but I don't think you even know yourself until you've started doing it whether you are that type of person. I think a lot of people thought absolutely fine, I can definitely do that. But when it came to push came to shove, they realised, in their heart that they were gonna do something they didn't want to do in the end, because they weren't that strong a personality to stand up to somebody, in their 50s who was perhaps not being particularly nice to you.
I imagine that takes quite a lot of bravery. I mean, like these guys, I've seen a few of them. They're units.
Yeah. Big guys. I mean, there are different approaches to it. Some are just generally brave. Some, like myself, just a touch arrogant, and probably just genuinely believe that you know better. And there's one chap. He just had a totally different way of doing it. He was just so relaxed about it, and it would just wash over him. And he even had a no swearing rule. If a contractor swore at him, he'd stop work. And they knew that, and reputation spreads. It's a small industry. But you know what? They all respected him and they loved him. And he was a strict analyst.
He's put his boundaries down, he's made them clear. Yeah.
But he just did it totally different. I've never met anyone who's done it that way before or since, but it just totally worked for him. So
interesting. Yeah, different personalities can do things different ways, right? I guess that takes me on to this question, which is, what do you think are the good attributes or the other sort of qualities that would create a star asbestos professional, someone who knows going to stick around and be able to do the work?
I think fundamentally you have to be inquisitive. It is one thing to know what you're looking at and looking for and where to look, but there is so much that so asbestos that you just shouldn't be where you find it, or just used in really weird ways that you'll find, and then you'll take back to your company, and nobody there will have ever seen that before either. So you have to be inquisitive. You have to want to open everything up. You have to really just have that genuine intrigue to go, I wonder if I unscrew that access panel, what's behind there? And that's got to go above anything time wise. You've got to have that commitment to be able to just go, this is what I'm doing today. This is going to take 3 hours longer than I thought. I'm not getting home till 7 o'clock tonight, but that's what it's going to take to get that finished. A
professional poker rounder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to be honest, that's a pretty accurate job description for asbestos surveyor. It's poke around, open up everything. I think a healthy dose of paranoia is good.
Okay.
I think working on. I always said this to everyone. Every surveyor I've ever trained. There'll be people who might watch this who I've trained or worked with who know, because I say this to everybody, which is, if you're an asbestos surveyor, you need to accept 2 things. The first is there is a God. The second is God hates you. And if you don't open up something, there will be asbestos behind it. If you open it up, that asbestos will magically disappear. It's not there. But I can guarantee anything you don't open up, if you don't open up the floor in that room, even though you haven't found anything in every other room in this building, that room is going to have asbestos in because you didn't check and God hates you.
Schrodinger's asbestos box.
Yeah.
I like it.
There you go. That's my philosophical advice for the day.
Relevant. So in terms of those kind of good things, yeah, I'm with you. You've got to be curious. What about the red flags then? So things that maybe you've spotted in people before, which kind of suggest maybe they wouldn't be cut out for the job.
I mean, different people have different levels of risk acceptance, don't they? I think just intrinsically, I think that's what people like Elon Musk, for example, have a high appetite for risk, and they obviously have wonderful successes and horrendous failures, don't they? And that's wonderful in entrepreneurship, but in asbestos, not so much.
Right.
I think you need to be diligent, you need to be thorough, and you need to, do the hard yards in it. And I think taking a risk is either going to result in you missing something, exposing yourself, or worse, exposing others.
So those risks, what would they be?
Well, I mean,
too quickly, not going into a room.
Yeah,
that kind of
you say, I don't need to worry about that room. I've checked those 3 rooms. There's nothing in them. There's nothing in the 4th room. Take that off and move on to the next one. So there's that type of risk. There are people that just go, it's just one sample. I won't bother putting my mask on for that. I'll just put a bit in the bag. That's fine. So people that are putting themselves at risk. Yeah. Well, personal risk, but then as the employer, they're doing that as my employee. So there is, it's a risk. It's a risk to that person, but it's also, it's a risk to
the company.
The company. Yeah. And then there are those who perhaps just generally don't care enough. So you have to really care. There are some people out there who don't care if they miss something at the end of the day, because if they lose that job, they'll get another job. And when it comes to asbestos and potentially people coming in after you and exposing themselves, you've got to have that moral compass. If you haven't got that fundamentally, then you haven't really got a hope of succeeding in our industry.
So maybe people who treat it more as a job as opposed to a mission and a career, and like something that's like a purpose,
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good way of putting it, actually.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about training, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's so hard to recruit asbestos professionals, and it sounds like just finding the right people and people who want to actually do the job is challenging, why not just train up the new generation?
Well, if you can hire them, then we can train them. I think that's the first thing is getting people to willingly come into the industry and stay in the industry long enough to be trained. We're doing more. So at NORAC, we're trying to do more. We're trying to make the industry more professional so that people want to join. And some of our members have worked with Tiro to build an apprenticeship route so we can get more people in and train them up. And we're also doing things with training videos, trying to upskill people. But ultimately, all these things we've already talked about need to improve to be able to get people in. We want to hire the next. There isn't a company out there who doesn't want to bring more people in, but we need to be able to retain them. And so many other factors, around pay and conditions and the perception of professionalism in our industry. All those things need to be fixed to retain them. And if you can't retain them, companies won't train them, because it costs so much money to train an asbestos consultant to a point that they are fee earning. From nothing to a point that they are able to make you money, you're talking bare minimum 6 months. In which case you still don't know whether they're going to be any good at it. That's just the time it takes to get them through their training qualifications and get them out doing enough to pass enough audits to get out and do the simplest of tasks. And then, once you've paid for their BOHS or RSPH qualifications, your trainers spent countless days with them. They've gone out and been audited by your quality team. If they're not going to stick at that for 2+ years, you're not making your money back on the investment. And even after that 2 years, they're not that experienced. They've perhaps, if they've been very good, they've perhaps progressed quickly and they've moved on to more complicated tasks. But different people learn at different speeds, and it takes years to get somebody to a standard where they're competent to sort of mid-level, and that's the real challenge. Particularly for large companies that have to look at their bottom line. That training budget needs to have deliverables, and quite often we found this at Adam. Adam's most 50% rate of people staying on after 2 years was considered good, and actually most companies probably wouldn't accept that level of attrition, but that's where we were. So yeah, I think so many things have to fall into place for that to work. But if we can get to a point that people are staying, then we can train people, we can bring people in. I think companies are trying. They are, but even not at a rate that's replacing them quick enough. Probably not training them to a level that's good enough, and a lot of them not sticking around because the hours are long and antisocial, and the pay's not particularly brilliant considering some of the less glamorous tasks you're doing in coveralls, crawling around in duct spaces and things like that. And other salaries have gone up. So you're looking at a graduate analyst, or an analyst with a couple of years experience isn't earning any more than you could earn as a department manager in a supermarket. And one of those jobs you get to go home at 6 p.m. and not think about it, and the other one you get in a decontamination unit covered in sweat, dirt at the end of the day, and then you got another 2-hour drive home in your work van before you get to go and do it all tomorrow. So there are a lot of things that we need to sort out.
I mean, that's it sounds like training people up is fraught with issues there. First of all, you've got to convince someone to join the company and hear that word asbestos and not run a million miles. Then you've got that 50% drop-off rate. 50% of people just aren't suitable, or don't have that that skill, that desire to stick around. And then you've got to retain the staff, right? Because you were saying as well in a previous conversation we had that you could train someone up, and after 6 months or a year or 2 years, they go off and work for your competitor, and you've just trained up their best surveyors.
Yeah, we did a lot of that. And look, they're offered more money. If I, in your early to mid 20s, if somebody comes to you and say, "Do you want to come work for me? I'll give you, a considerable amount more money to do it," you're going to go and do it. I totally understand that. There was no hard feelings when people, well, not openly towards them. I might have gone home and had a little grumble about it, but
you can understand the reasons.
Yeah, there's not that much loyalty. You like to think there is. You like to think that people buy into your company values and things like that. But ultimately, we're not the only people that have those values. And if other companies are desperately short of staff, they'll up the rates, and some companies can afford to pay more than others. But what I would say is, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and those who went to competitors inevitably ended up probably working harder than they would have had to if they'd stayed. And also, I think perhaps progression-wise, if they'd stuck it out with us, they may have found that they'd progressed quicker and they would have been used as less of a commodity. But that's anecdotal and perhaps just me being a bit bitter. But
yeah, and I've heard that from a few people as well. The grass is always greener. They've made similar jumps and then regretted it. The culture was great at my first company. I wish I could go back.
There are two types of moves though. I've no animosity towards the individuals. Ultimately, you've got to look after yourself, haven't you? And you're there to make a living for yourself and to hopefully put some savings together and save up for a house or a wedding or whatever it is your next life goal is, and that's fine. The companies, however, there are two types. If one of your competitors who also trains individuals happens to offer them something that they can't turn down, they go, fine, I have no issues with that. What really used to get my goat was companies who never train anybody. They don't put anything back in, but they just take out. They would just take from other people and try, just offer a bit more money, take people from other companies, but they would never put anything in. Right. And that used to really annoy me, because they were just they were taking those people on, working them to death in this industry. I don't mean that, but you know what I mean. They worked them hard, and quite often they get demoralised and leave and do something else. So they were taking from the industry rather than adding anything in. I think if everybody did a bit of training, you wouldn't have to take from other consultancies as much, but also I think everybody would perhaps be a bit more amicable about it, because we're all putting in.
Yeah, and we trained this guy up. He went to work for our competitor, but they trained one up, and he came to us.
Exactly.
Of thing. It's a bit more equitable. And I guess there are some companies who have like dedicated training arms. The big ones like AEC have their own training centre. And
Yeah. I got.
But is it a small minority of the companies who actually do train? What do you say?
It's a small minority who train in-house, have their own training divisions, but a larger number of companies who do in-house training and then put them through this. So I, for example, Adams, when I started, I was trained in-house by Adams, but then I went to do my exams at AEC. So yeah, there are a large number of companies are training, and I think there's probably a large number who would train if they could, be sure of getting some return for that training. But yeah, it's a challenge.
It sounds like it. And
I feel like we've been very negative so far on this podcast. I think
well,
no solutions, just.
Well, what are the solutions then, in your opinion, Alex? Is there anything that can be done to improve the quality? I mean, obviously you're a committee member of NORAC and you're trying to improve quality that way. What can we do to push up the quality in this industry?
I mean, I think as I said earlier, I think we need to, as an industry, we need to look, give ourselves a long, hard look in the mirror and be the professional industry that we should be and that clients, want from us. Because there are a number of surveyors and analysts who are just not very good at their jobs for one reason or another, and they're still in the industry and they go from one company to the next. We fired somebody and they got a job in the car park. They stood in the company, while they were emptying out their company car, they were on the phone, and by the end of that conversation, they were starting tomorrow at one of our competitors. If you're looking for a job middle of the week, there's only one reason you're looking for that job middle of the week. But no references, nobody ever asked.
Right.
They don't. I think we need to get rid of that bums on seat mentality and just accept that if we're going to have a better quality of industry, there might be less of us for a little while, but we need to plough that into train. Those who are decent need to be training up the next generation, and we need to be investing not for this financial year or next financial year, but we need to be looking 5, 10, 15 years down the line and go, right, where do we want to be as an industry? Who's going to be doing this job? We're looking at the HSE and the government, and everyone are now looking at proactive removal, and they're looking at an asbestos eradication strategy. Who's going to do all that work? We're not training them. We're not bringing them in, and we're losing them at a horrendous rate. Not to take into account those who are training, doing a year or two here, and then getting their visa to go to Australia or New Zealand and do it for far more money over there. So I think we need to take a longer term view on it, and start putting training, and that will involve putting rates up because we need to pay them right. We need to have money to be able to train them, money to be able to offer an attractive enough whole package. Salary, training, progression, the works, to keep people in the industry. And I think we need to ditch the race to the bottom, accept that it's, we can't still be offering the same rates we were offering 10, 15 years ago, which some companies really are. Yeah, and I think, for a professional service, clients need to spend more money. And I say that as a client who spends a not inconsiderable amount of money on asbestos consultants, but it needs to happen. We need to start acting far more professionally than we are as a sector, and it's one of the things that NORAC's there for. We're member funded, the committee are volunteers, but our purpose is to drive up the professionalism in our industry, and our members are really passionate about that. And that's UCAS accredited consultancies, that's non-accredited surveyors, that is the good side of the whole industry coming together and putting some money in to try and drive up those standards, because we all see it and we all know what the problems are, but in isolation we can't solve it. Together as an industry, if we come together, we can make ourselves more professional. We can root out bad practice and set good practice as a standard, and we can advocate that good practice to clients so they understand the difference between those two costs, even though they're the same on paper. And we can advocate HSE and UCAS to bring those standards to where they need to be. It needs to be a collaborative approach, I think, because back in the day at Adams, we were training all those people in isolation, but that ultimately hasn't helped the industry that much. We've trained up people for a lot of our competitors who've burnt through them in a couple of years and then they've left. We need, as an industry, we need a strategy, and we need to understand that the amount of work that we're doing, perversely given how long ago asbestos was banned, but the amount of work we're doing is going to go up over the next few years. We're removing more asbestos. Asbestos eradication is it's coming. The conversations are only heading one way. So we're going to need more surveyors, more analysts, more removal contractors. But as we know from experience in the 1980s when asbestos was banned and we started removing it, just overnight creating demand for something, there isn't the skills to fulfill that, and the quality of the work done then was appalling because there wasn't a depth of talent there to do those jobs. So we need to build those jobs now. We know asbestos eradication is coming. We know that there isn't enough skilled labour to do the jobs that we have now, let alone any increase. And that's not even taking into account the fact that a lot of duty holders still don't understand their duties and aren't getting surveys done. They haven't got asbestos registers. They're not managing asbestos properly. I mean, if the HSE have got another campaign out at the minute trying to increase awareness, which is great. If they have any success, it's only going to increase the workload, and we can't fulfil the orders we have now as an industry. So I think we do need to take a whole cold hard look, get together, whether it be through NORAC or some other means. But I think we need to plan collectively and trying to make sure that our industry actually has the people, the skills, and the reputation it deserves 10, 15 years, next generation.
Like it. Good solutions. You're one of the good guys, Alex, I can tell. And it's just funny when you were talking about people rushing off to New Zealand to work over there. We actually have a client over there who once rang me from a canoe. And he was just out on the water doing his thing between jobs, different lifestyle out there. But actually, one of the other things I picked up on was you're talking about the fact that there is still a lot of asbestos to be removed, and we talked a little bit about how a lot of the talent that's leaving the industry. Two of the initiatives I see currently in the asbestos industry are the proposed or the consultation from the HSE as to whether UCAS should become mandatory, and also the asbestos information certificate, both of which I think could lead to more people leaving the industry, and therefore it becomes a bit of a vicious circle. So I don't fully understand. My personal view is I don't fully understand that choice if that was to go ahead. And I'll not sort of take sides too much, but it is something that I sort of hear a lot about. I would love to hear some of your kind of hot takes on those things that are currently happening in the industry. So, for example, do you think UCAS accreditation should be mandatory? I know you've worked in a company where you had UCAS accreditation.
I mean, I'll give you my personal opinion on this, because at NORAC we have members who are UCAS accredited and members who are not UCAS accredited, both of which are doing a good job. But I also work for a duty holder that insists on UCAS accreditation. So
You've seen both sides.
I've seen both sides. My personal viewpoint is I don't think it will happen. Given the way that accreditation works at the moment, I don't think it necessarily should happen. Which isn't to say if accreditation was a bit different, maybe I'd be more in favour. So to break that down, it's not going to happen because UCAS are currently understaffed as it is, and if you speak to a number of our UCAS accredited members, they will soon tell you about the turnaround times in getting accreditation and having non-conformities signed off, things like that. It's not where it needs to be, and UCAS have openly acknowledged that through the consultations that we've had through NORAC with them. So I think making UCAS accreditation mandatory and theoretically having all of those new companies having to apply for accreditation in a short space of time is not going to work. I don't think it should happen as it is for a couple of reasons. The first is, having had UCAS accreditation and seeing how it works, I don't think it's rooting out the quality issues. And we know that anecdotally, the whole industry knows that anecdotally, because a lot of the work that we do, a lot of the surveys that we do and the testing we do, it's of jobs that have already been done once, twice, So clearly it's not working, because including boiler rooms having to be cleaned 2, 3, 4 times. Surveys have been redone because the first surveyor missed it, and that's not clearly non-UCAS accredited surveyors or UCAS accredited surveying organisations. So I don't think UCAS as it is rooting out the quality, and I think that needs to be looked at as a separate thing. But also the cost for gaining UCAS accreditation. I mean, I spoke to a friend in the industry who has recently gained accreditation. They're a very small company, and that cost them £20,000, which for most small businesses, and particularly those starting out, it's a huge amount of capital outlay when you haven't got guaranteed client base. I don't think that's necessarily proportional for smaller companies. So I think it needs to be looked at. I do think that some sort of quality scheme is a good idea, because I think there is nothing stopping anybody from doing their P402 and setting themselves up as a limited company and doing asbestos surveys with very little training or understanding of what they're doing. And again, you speak to the HSE or most of our member companies at NORAC, they'll be able to give you stories of people that have done that and they've fleeced people. So I think there does need to be some sort of quality control, but I don't think the current system we have is it. And I think just making the status quo mandatory for all is not going to fix anything, and if anything, it will probably break the system we do have, because there isn't the capacity there.
And someone I was speaking to the other day raised a really good point as well. Like, if there aren't enough good qualified surveyors in the industry, then having UCAS as a barrier to entry means there'll be less new surveyors coming in as well, because then it's that barrier to be able to start up. You don't necessarily have £20,000 or that time commitment to be able to sort of spend.
Yeah, it stops people from going out on their own and doing their own thing. The companies that have got existing accreditation, it's an existing cost for them, and that's part of their cost of business. But they'll take people on and train them. But you're not gonna get small companies starting. There's not going to be anybody coming in new into the industry in smaller companies gaining UCAS accreditation. It's just not.
Unless they've got a big wad of cash in their back pocket.
Well, yeah. I suppose you've got to ask where that's come from. But
no. Great, and thanks for answering that one, Alex. I really appreciate that. Another thing that's being currently touted is kind of like a version, from what I understand, of almost like the EPC certificates that you have out there for energy. So some of the larger consultancies are trying to promote, it's called the Asbestos Information Certificate, or AIC. I guess that's my own understanding, is it's something you can slap on a wall and it tells you whether you're compliant or not compliant.
That's the gist. There's some really clever stuff behind it, actually, involving AI to kind of take all your asbestos information together and give you that score. A couple of committee members in NORAC work for organisations that are developing it. And I
didn't realise that.
Yeah.
So what's your view on the idea in general?
As a committee, we have mixed views on it. There isn't a sort of strong opinion one way or the other at the moment. My personal viewpoint is I don't have an issue with the premise. I think anything that informs duty holders of where they are can only be a good thing if it means that they act on that. My concern with it is how it's going to be implemented. So is it going to be controlled by a small number of UCAS accredited consultancies and thus drive this sort of consolidation of the industry further into these large organisations? Is it going to be some sort of open source thing that other companies can access, in which case how do you control who should have access and who shouldn't have access? And to be fair, if you speak to the people in AAC, they don't have answers to that yet. It's still very much at concept stage, and there aren't answers to all these questions yet. So that's one thing. The other thing is it's already a requirement to have an asbestos register and to manage asbestos. Having a certificate that summarises that information is only good if the data you're working from is good in the first place. And I'm sure you guys at Flow will understand that as well. It's one of the founding principles of IT, isn't it? Garbage in, garbage out. And I think a lot of asbestos registers, again, going back to the quality conversation we've just had, race to the bottom, surveyors who haven't had that experience, etc. A lot of asbestos registers perhaps aren't where they should be. And I think just putting a certificate on the front of that existing information, if it's no good, isn't really that helpful. So I think it has the potential to be good. I think it's at a very early stage, and we probably don't really know yet, what the form is going to be.
So I think they're trying to make it only available for UCAS companies, with the idea that I guess that the quality of those surveys is going to be better. That for me feels like another way to gate access to the industry in a sense.
It's certainly, I've heard that also. If that's the way it goes, then I think that's potentially going to cause some interesting challenges in the industry, particularly amongst duty holders who perhaps have had very good service off of non-accredited consultants who perhaps could be very experienced, and they might have done 20, 30 years in the industry, gone out solo and be offering asbestos management consultancy as opposed to doing surveys themselves, but they manage the register on behalf of their clients. Are those people no longer deemed competent to manage that information? There are so many little things like that I think haven't been answered yet. So I'm waiting to see what the final form is before I cast a kind of viewpoint on it, really.
In my industry, in the software industry, a lot of companies will open source their software, and it's like it becomes available to the industry. I mean, even Elon Musk, did that with some of his battery technology, right? And that, I think, can be very beneficial for the industry. And from what you're saying, it sounds like there's some proprietary tech and algorithms there to figure out the scoring and things like that. I mean, my personal view is maybe they should open source that and allow other people to sort of peek in behind the curtain, because it does generally make things better. You know, if everyone can collaboratively see how those things are worked out, that's going to help everyone, right? That's my personal viewpoint anyway. Not the view of my company or anything like that. So
well, this is it, isn't it? And I dare say, if you got the founding members of the AIC in a room together and ask you these questions, you might not get the same answer for each question to each of them either. I think the principle is using AI to do something that we couldn't do before with asbestos information. And I think we'd be foolish as an industry not to look at what artificial intelligence can do to improve what we're offering. So, you know, good luck to them. But I do think when it comes to implementation, we need to be very careful that we're not icing out good quality consultancies and consultants, but also we're not degrading what we're offering to clients by really reducing the pool of people who can deliver it. You know what I mean? I don't think we want to be in a position where a duty holder is being forced to use one of these small number of companies to do the data handling, even if they're happy with the information they're getting from somewhere else. It seems like double handling, because they'll still have to manage their in-house asbestos registers. It would just be another layer of compliance that they have to fulfill and pay another company to do. So, and we don't know the cost yet either, do we? I mean, is this going to be something that, you know, if you use us for your asbestos surveys, you're going to get at a discounted rate, or if you're not, there's going to be this huge inflationary figure. There is that risk, isn't there? I guess of it being profit used for profiteering, but equally, you know, there is that potential for it to add benefit, right? If it's handled sensitively and if they can get it working, you know, from a technological point of view, it's pretty cool, isn't it? If you can get AI to take, it's not just looking at the condition scores and your material scores, it's taking into account, have you got a management plan, you know, what your systems are, it's taking all these things together to, you know, create this theoretical score. So
does that not mean it becomes dated quite quickly? I mean, I'm just thinking, you know, you can be compliant one day and then non-compliant the next, and I guess that's correct. I guess, but
again, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because large organisations, you know, you're doing lots of new R&D surveys and abatement work all the time, aren't you? So yeah, theoretically, that certificate will be one colour one day and different colour the next for one of your sites.
I also wonder as well about the psychology behind it, like an EPC rating. Yeah, sure, you can put a sticker on the wall, but it's not necessarily affecting anyone negatively. Okay, you might look at that rating and think, oh God, these guys aren't very good for the environment. But an asbestos certificate, if you've scored low, you might be looking at that and thinking, hey, that's my health. You know, these guys they're not doing a good job.
It depends on how the algorithm scores it, doesn't it? Because I think this is part of the problem we have with the current asbestos registers. You might have a load of entries that say control restrict access, and on the face of it, you're looking at going, God, these guys aren't managing things very well. You know, there's a lot of asbestos here, and it's very highly scored. But the reality could be that that's above a drop plasterboard ceiling, which is above another drop plasterboard ceiling, and that debris is like, you know, 2 layers of plasterboard away from everybody else, and it's not being disturbed. And actually, smashing all that plasterboard out to get to it is a far riskier activity than just leaving it be. So the current way we exhibit data doesn't necessarily, with priority scores and risk scores, doesn't necessarily always fully reflect the reality. So perhaps this will offer a clearer picture, but we've yet to see. I think this is very early days. I think we'll still be having this conversation 5 years from now.
Yeah, interesting. And finally, just to close out this interview, Alex, I just want you to tell me about what you're currently involved in and how people can learn more about you.
So in terms of what I'm currently involved in, beyond business as usual, we're managing asbestos for John Lewis and spending their money, much to their horror. I spending my time volunteering on the NORAC committee. We're doing a number of things. So we're doing a load of training videos at the moment. We're starting in with the bulk sampling laboratories, and the idea is we're going to create a library of training videos to try and upskill consultants. We're also creating a document library, and the idea is to build a sort of a national repository of asbestos information, and then hopefully open that up to members to contribute and actually build a really good one-stop place for that. And at the moment, a lot of our time is being held by organising the first NORAC conference. We're doing a proper conference up in Manchester this year. What we've tried to do is make it very relevant to our members, consultancies and affiliated industries. So less hard science and epidemiology, more real life, real world applications for our members. And we're making it really really cheap. We don't want any barriers to people turning up. So I think for members it's only £99 for the day, and actually if you bring additional people, it's only a very small additional fee. What we're hoping, and if anyone listening is a technical manager or director of a company, what we'd love is if you to bring 1 or 2 of your consultants, give them that opportunity to develop, to get some CPD, to upskill themselves, and we're having the first ever awards ceremony, celebrate achievement. It's going to be a great night. The idea is hopefully get the industries together. Let's talk about the issues. We're going to have hopefully have some really interesting open debates. We're hoping to have a sort of, and it's not confirmed, but we're hoping to have a sort of UCAS versus non-UCAS surveying discussion. Make it really open.
I want to be fiery.
That's the hope. Let's get everyone in a room together. Let's discuss them. Let's actually, see what ideas people have. And if we've all got the same ideas, let's agree on them and let's do them.
Yeah, sounds like you're doing something really positive there, Alex.
I hope so.
You're doing some great work. Well, thanks so much for your time. Best of luck with the conference. I hope it goes really well. And I really appreciate all your views today.
No, cheers for letting me on. Any opportunity to moan and talk about asbestos for a bit of time is how long we spent on it. I can't even find the timer. But yeah, appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Cheers very much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this content. I hope you got something out of it. If you know anyone else who is affected by this topic, please forward this on to them. If you've got a hot topic you'd like to discuss, please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Let's keep this conversation going, and we'll see you next time.